This is Startup Story with Ashutosh Srivastava, and today we are doing something very, very interesting. This is, a technology that I think has been the buzzword for a long time, and today we're going to go under the hood and see what it's all about. And today we have Ashutosh Srivastava, the Global Director INQ and CTO and founder of Jodova. And over to you, sir. Enlighten us about blockchain today.
Thank you for the introduction, Jagat. So yeah, like you said, I mean, we've been doing a lot of startup story related stuff. We talked a lot of how startups should behave, technology, teams, conflict resolution, equity and everything. And we thought that over the last 2 weeks, there's been like a lot of buzzword around regulations for blockchain and cryptocurrencies and stuff. So we thought maybe it would be an interesting to do like a small key up session on blockchain. Obviously, it's not a Gyan session, right? So we'll stay away from the basic Gyan as much as possible, and I'd like to cover some basic things in terms of what is the use case of blockchain right now, right? I personally use blockchain in my company, so it's a live use case, and then there is a lot of use cases that we have seen around industrial IoT, cybersecurity, government. So we'll cover a lot of that, and then where it's being used to give some people an idea of how blockchain scenario looks like. All right, I'll just yeah, thank you. I'll just start with the screen share. Okay. I hope you can see my screen.
Yeah, the audience can click on his video, the slide video, to full screen it. It's perfect. Yeah, go on, Ashutosh. Fantastic.
All right. Okay. All right. So, a lot of people think that blockchain is spelled BITCOIN, right? It's not, right? So it's a very old concept. The original paper was written in 1991, right? It was written by a bunch of researchers who are into distributed computing, right? And there's one thing that I keep saying about distributed computing is that the life of distributed computing would overrun any buzzword that is out there, whether it's machine learning, whether it's blockchain, or whatever comes in genetic algorithms and whatnot, right? Everything comes down to how well you can compute things. And then in 1991, a group of researchers came together, and they thought of when we are sharing a document across platforms, what would be the ideal way to do that? And then they said the best way to do that is you sign the documents cryptographically and then send it over. And that principle is what Satoshi Nakamoto used when he used he built Bitcoin. So it's not something that is a very new concept. It's a pretty old concept, and I'll just give a very simple demo in a short while to explain how we have always seen some part of blockchain in our lives, but we've never thought about it. Right? So by definition of it, what is a blockchain? So blockchain is a distributed ledger, and what that means is that the same copy of that file, right? Let's say you have a file on your system, and then you realize that maybe if I keep that file to myself, it might not be 100% secure. I may lose my computer. I may format my drive, and I'll lose this file. So let me back it up. Let me put that file on another pen drive, or I give it to someone else, and give it to multiple people. So that, in essence, is what the crux of blockchain is, right? It's a ledger which is shared between people. And if you have ever, another way to look at it is when we were kids, right? When we were growing up, when we were college, we'd go to eat together, and then we'd share the meal, right? So somebody would pay up, and then we would all pay that person either that moment or towards the end of the month, right? So that's basically a ledger, if you think about it. So if Jagat, you and I, we sit down and then we have meals every day of the month, and at the end of the month we decide that okay, we've kept a tab of who's spent what, and then we balance it out and we give it to each other. That's basically a ledger, right? And you keep one copy, I keep one copy, that becomes distributed. So in essence, that's what it is, right? Why it's called blockchain is because if you have one transaction, right, and you take multiple of those transactions, and from that transaction you create a block, and that block is what gets added to the chain, and that's why it's called a blockchain, right? So each block in a blockchain consists of multiple transactions, the transactions which are comprised either by some rule, right? Whether it's a contract or it's a proof of work, whichever theory it is, right? So Bitcoin uses something called the proof of work. So you use proof of work to send the data. If you're not using proof of work, then there's the contract, right? The digital contract against which the blockchain is issued, right? So there is some theory on the basis of which it's agreed to put on the block, right? The most important thing, two of the most important things when it comes to blockchain is that blockchain is one immutable. That means that anything written on the blockchain cannot be overwritten, right? So it's a one-time right. So take it or leave it. It may be a good thing, it may be a bad thing, but it is what it is, right? The second thing is that if you want a new node to be added to the system, there has to be a consensus of at least 51% of the people agreeing to put that node in, right? That means that if you're a no good person, right, who's trying to put like a wrong block or tamper a block and then put it back in, you'd need the consensus of other people in the group, right? And that's where it becomes very very interesting, right? um, so I mean, this is a more technology analogy. I mean, I'm just going to go a little sideways, and then I'll give a very different analogy, right? So over here, right, if you look at, I hope you can see my folder structure, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
all good. All good.
All right. Okay. So if you can see this, right, please go away. Yeah. So imagine that no, I should not call it block. Let me call it like transaction one, right? So this is a transaction one, right? And then this is a transaction two. These are just files I created, like random files, right? So uh, and you take 10 of these files and you put it in a folder, right? That becomes a block, correct? And similarly, you'll have other folders which will have like other files, right? But the moment these two are linked, the moment block one and block two are linked, that means I'm saying that block one is a predecessor of block two. You're forming a chain, right? And that is basically a blockchain. So that's why I said that we have all been inherently using blockchain, right? So there is a certain way where we organize ourselves. We say that these many things go in one folder, and this folder should go in another folder, right? Programmers do that, that's the simplification of the code or the art of code writing, right? So your assets go in one folder, your code goes in one folder, and then what is public goes to another folder, right? So you arrange your stuff yourself, right? So you've created like 3 blocks, right? And all of those 3 blocks are contained within a bigger block, which is the blockchain, which is the root node, right? So within that, this root node knows that all these are inside me, right? And then it also knows that these are connected in one form or the fashion, one form or the other, right? So that's basically the core definition of how blockchain works, right? Obviously a very simplified version of it, right? But uh, this this analogy is to make sure that anyone who has ever used a computer, which is everyone, can understand like how blockchain works. Now coming to a little more technical definition, right? So blockchain is like database, and I'm you know uh, saying a very blasphemous statement right now, but we'll go with that, right? So it's like an encrypted database, right? And this analogy is very important because when you're talking about a database, right, there are 3 aspects to it. One is the database itself. The other is the protocols. The protocols are the way you interact with this database. If you're using Oracle, then there's PLSQL. If you're using MS SQL, MySQL, so then you're using Transact SQL. Postgres is PGSQL, Cassandra is CSQL. So these are the different protocols in which we interact with the users, right? So if you're a user, you would use these protocols to interact with the system, right? So And then there are the clients, right, who use these protocols: Oracle, Postgres, MySQL, MSSQL, Sybase, Cassandra, right? So all of these are using one of these protocols to talk to the system. That means that from a user's perspective, there is one way and one way, not one way, but within the client, there is one way to interact with the system, right? Understanding blockchain is something similar, right? So instead of having one database or like one blockchain, every user in the system will have the same copy. Like, going back to our example, if Jagat, you and I share a ledger, right? So you'll also have the copy, I will also have the copy, right? And so it's a two-way communication. So if you want something to be added, we go into a consensus and you add it, it comes to me. If I want something to be added, and then I get a consensus from you, and then we add it, right? So in this case, what are the protocols, right? So protocols is your proof of work, which is mining, right? And then the other one is smart contracts, right? So these are the main two areas through which uh, blockchains are communicated, right? So every block, every rather transaction, right, has three parts. So if I may write here, right? So the first part, okay, the first part is the transaction itself, right? So this could be, if you're talking about cryptocurrencies, so it's the sender information, receiver information, and the amount, right? The second part is basically the header of the last file, right? So because going back here, right? So if we come here, so then these are 10 transactions, right? So these 10 transactions belong to this file, correct? So this is the root file, and then this file, this block, will have the address of this, or the hash of this, and the hash of itself, right? So those are the three parts. So previous hash, I'll write it in my terrible handwriting, and then third is the current hash, right, of the system. And how the hashes are calculated, we'll do a very simple, understanding of that also. It's not that complicated, but there is a reason to use that. Right? So these are the three parts to having incorporated in each transaction. So when we are talking about mining, so it's basically, in terms of cryptocurrency, it will have the transaction itself will have, like, records. In terms of, let's say we are talking about IoT, then it will have the handshake between the sensors. If you're talking about, like, land records, then it will have, the deed details and the contract itself and stuff like that, right? So transaction is basic. So these are the protocols. And then the third thing is the clients. So you have Bitcoin, Ethereum, Ripple, plenty of them, right? So you name it, and then there's a client to handle this, right? So each of them have their own blockchain, which is used to transact their money. It's used for, to do their private transactions, public transactions, and whatnot. Right? Okay. So now that we have, let's say, created this analogy, and then we have this, right? Now, why is it different, right? And I mean, this question comes to me a lot, right? That what's the difference between blockchain and database? I mean, database can do all of this, and then it can do much better, and that's absolutely right, right? I'm not going to say here that blockchain is providing something which is not out there, right? But here's my point, right? Blockchain is a little more opinionated than anything else out there, which means that there is only one set of uh, cybersecurity principles to follow. You have to give a digital identity to the person who is coming to interact with blockchain, right? You have to give digital identity to the blockchain itself, right? And the way to do that is more or less same, right? I mean, it's a hash key generated from SHA 256. It's a and then you combine multiple transactions, each of them, you use SSA 256 again, and then you keep on doing that, and then, you form a tree, which is called the binary mapping tree, and then you get that tree. But the point is that it's very opinionated, right? If I tell you right now that, hey, you and I, let's do a transaction, and then, we have to decide that, we both are doing justice to ourselves. Maybe we'll get a third person involved, right, who will say that, keep the truth between us, right? And so that could be multiple ways to do this, right? So when we talk about cybersecurity, there's like 1,000 ways to do it. There's like RSA algorithms, and then within that there are so many implementations, and then there is also DES algorithms. Within that there's so many implementations. But when it comes to blockchain, there's only one algorithm, the elliptic curve cryptography. That's the principle used, and then there is one way to do that based on the your key that is generated. So that's one opinion. The second opinion is that it's immutable, right? So anything that is written on it is not changed, right? Sure, you can achieve the same thing in databases as well. You can have like user permissions and all, but that's something you have to do, right? Which a lot of people don't, right? And that's what is different, because in blockchain, you don't have a choice. It comes with bag and baggage, right? And the third thing is, which is more relevant here, is that it's public, right? Anyone who is in the network, I mean, whether we are talking about like a public blockchain or a private blockchain, right? Anyone who has a digital identity will be able to view that data. There is no permission issue. There is no such thing. Right? So you're able to do that. So it's very opinionated, and then if you based on that, if you eventually find a use case for it, it's going to be the right use case, right? So to add a new node, right? When we're talking about blockchain and we want to add a new node to a blockchain, right? We talk about consensus. So let's say okay. So we want to add a new node, right? So there is basically a set of rules that are followed. So whether we are talking about smart contracts, whether we are talking about mining, we have to verify that a new transaction exists, right? That's the cryptography part of it. And in terms of when we are talking about like smart contracts, right? It's slightly more easier, because you're saying that you know there is these set of rules that you have to follow to get into the network, right? But in terms of like mining or proof of work, right? There is like a little bit of gameplay that happens. People give like certain keys, and then you have to find the remaining key and stuff like that, right? So, but any which way, it will involve a combination of game theory, cryptography, and cybersecurity principles, right? So let's say we want to add a new node, right? The new node can only be added if 51% of the node, network agrees to add that new node, and that's what I've shown here, right? So it's not like all of them have to agree, but at least 51% have to agree, and that's when a new node is entered into the system, right? So I'll just briefly touch, why we think that this is more secure, right? The first thing is, as I said, everyone who joins a network has to have like a digital ID created, right? And that digital ID follows the cybersecurity principles of ECC, which is the elliptic curve cryptography. And my tongue always sleeps when I say that, for some reason. The second thing is that each transaction has a unique fingerprint, which is very hard to break. At the moment, we are talking about 2 raised to power 256, right? And that's the cryptography key, right? So if you want to think about 2 raised to power 56 is it's 8 times 2 raised to power 32, right? And 2 raised to power 32 is close to 4 billion, right? So you're saying 4 billion multiplied 8 times, like 4 billion times 4 billion times 4 billion times 4 billion, right? So even the most powerful computer, if you think of, or like a group of computers, or if you take every AWS machine, which is there infrastructure wise, and you try to break it, it's going to take quite a bit of time to find all the like permutations and combinations to do that, which is why it's so secure, right? And the two parts, right? So one is the consensus, the other is, let's say somebody wants somebody tampers the block itself, right? If you tamper the block itself, it's not like you can get it added to the system. One, because there's consensus, and the second is The moment you change the block, you've changed the hash of that block. That means that every other hash after that is also nullified. So that means that if you have changed the hash here, then you have to change the hash of here, 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 and further on, right? So the longer the chain, the harder it is to the change the blocks, right? Second part to it is it takes about 10 minutes to verify and rewrite a hash, right? That means that if I have hacked here, then I'll need 10 minutes here, another 10 minutes here, another 10 minutes here, and so forth, right? So it's very hard to hack into it and then make sure that you're doing it. And let's say even if we are able to do this, we still have to get the consensus, and that's where people fail, right? So it's a dual way, security, right? Right? And of course, because it's based on a digital identity, your own digital identity is created using ECC. So ECC uses 2 raised 41 for generating the private key, right? So so that makes it even more secure and passwordless, right? Um, then we talk about the authentication, right? So let's say I want to get into it, you want to get into the game, right? So you want to start transactions in blockchain, correct? How easy is it, right? The first thing is you have to get a digital ID. Once you get a digital ID, you have to either do a proof of work or you have to do a contract, right? Both of these requires an authentication known as zero knowledge proof, right? In a zero knowledge proof, uh, only a part of the problem and a part of solution is provided, right? And this is purely from a proof of concept point of view, right? But proof of work point of view. But just imagine I'll give like a part of the problem and a part of the solution. And the idea is to find the whole problem and the solution, right? And that's why it's called a zero knowledge proof, right? To understand it very simply, right? So um, I don't have the answer to the question that I asked, right? But I know that this is in the ballpark of the answer that I'm expecting. So if I ask you, like, do you live in India, right? A yes or no is a direct answer. If you say yes or you say no, it's a direct answer. But you say, I live in Karnataka, right? And then you check, Karnataka falls in India, right? And then you get that result, right? So that's how, zero knowledge proofs work, right? So this is how you prove yourself. Of course, in terms of, this is more in terms of cryptography, and then you have to verify the hashes. You get only a part of the beginning hash and the part of the solutions end hash, and then you have to find out how the hash is being created, right? But in principle, that's how it works. So now we'll get into a little bit more in depth into where blockchain is being used, right? I mean, these are live cases. These are not like proof of concept level. They were proof of concept in some stages maybe 2 years ago, but there's like a real use case which is happening right now, and I've been a part of few of them, so I mean I can vouch and validate that these are true and these exist, right? So we'll get into that, right? Um, the first and foremost, we'll cover finance because it was born out of cryptocurrency, and it has seen a life in cryptocurrency. But it's going beyond, right? So there is a Founders Bank, right? It's using the digital identity part of blockchain, right? So it's using the digital identity for mobile wallets, right? So it's verifying users based on that digital identity, right? Why it's useful is because this digital identity is not tied to the national identity. That means your mobile wallet can work anywhere in the world as long as it's on the ledger, right? The ledger is distributed across the world, right? So you don't need a social security number or an Aadhaar to let it work, right? So as long as you have that digital identity, that mobile wallet will work, and then you'll be able to do wallet to wallet transfer, right? That's the first use case. Of course, JP Morgan has been using it for transaction management for almost 3 years now. And the POC has been going on since I was there, so since 2011, right? And that's my entry to blockchain. So basically, my mentor is the one who started Hyperledger way back in 2011. And then, that's when we started to work on it and then tried to figure out like how blockchain is separate from like Bitcoin, and then how to get into that, right? So it's using that for transaction management, right? And it issued like a $150 million debt to Bank of Canada on blockchain, right? So the entire transaction is available. So in banking in US, there is a banking blockchain network, right? I think it's called BBN, right? So that banking blockchain network is shared between Goldman, JP, Barclays, Fidelity, also, if I'm not wrong. So basically, when this debt issuance is done, it's available to everyone. That JP Morgan has done that, right? And it's based on smart contracts. So, whatever the contract is on the basis of that. And since that contract is also on the block, so it's also immutable. So nobody can change that contract, and any part of that deal is on the contract, right? So that's where JP Morgan is using it, right? The Santander Bank in UK has a very different idea, uh, which is taking something from Javi, which is the Founders Bank idea, that they were taking the digital ID for mobile wallets, but instead of using it for mobile wallets, these guys are using it for international transactions, right? So they're using Ripple. I don't know, given the Ripple's condition right now, I'm not sure if they've tied up with someone else, but it's basically enabling foreign exchange transactions between Europe and South America, right? And every transaction is written on blockchain. So it's one of the first international payments based on traditional currencies, right? That's using blockchain. Then in healthcare, the use cases are very similar. I mean, it's mostly around patient records, but Philips being Philips, this hashed health is a Philips, a part of health suite. So everywhere where Philips is in healthcare, they have this hashed suite network where doctors, patients, hospitals, nurses, patient records, everything is on blockchain, right? And as long as you're part of the hash collective, right? So if I'm a patient, I have my information here. I can just go to another hospital, another area, another doctor, and if they are a part of the Philips Health suite, they will have my information. They'll be able to pull my information up to the last minute and say, whatever has happened to me and how we've been doing it, right? So pretty fantastic. It's been there for almost 2 years, and Texas was their first, breakthrough in Houston. So they started with the Texas Memorial Hospital, and then they moved on from there. Right? Health Linkages, it's a startup, so it's using uh, the same principle, but they have restricted themselves only to data governance of patient data. Right? They're just ensuring that all the patient data is on blockchain, and nobody's tampering with that data, and then that data is in one piece, and it's also maintaining multiple visits to the patient. Government, it's an interesting use case. The oldest one, the first and foremost to get onto that was Colorado in 2017, where they were using blockchain to put their vital data, right? Because they were getting a lot of cybersecurity hacks. So they're using blockchain to store their most secure data, like the data that they want to be kept most securely, and they're sharing it within their own network, right? Um, Australia has started, and this is a more of a POC. I think this started last year with IBM, and then they're using it for storing the government records. And slightly different from Colorado. Colorado wants to store only sensitive data. These guys are storing all the government data on, like data and activities on blockchain. That's at least a proposal. And the lastly, India also got into that game in 2018. India did a POC with land records in Andhra Pradesh, and this paragraph, I mean, is verbatim from Government of India website. I didn't change it for the purpose of letting people know that there is actually something happening in the government level as well in blockchain, right? So this POC was done, and it has moved quite a bit in terms of like regulations, and you know whether it will see the light of the day or not, it's a question, but at least there's something happening there. Industrial IoT is one use case which is very close to my heart. I mean, I've spent almost last 7-8 years in industrial IoT. The first one is gateway authentication. That's what my company does. We harden our gateways using blockchain. So all of our gateways use blockchain, and then they become part of the block, right? So we're not obviously sharing transaction data, or we're not getting sensor data on the blockchain, but at least we are getting from an authentication perspective, if a new device is added, or if a device is pulled out of network and then put back in, so we're using blockchain to say that there was a digital identity which changed, and then we are making it hackproof. So that's our use case. The other two are the ones that I've been very actively involved in. One is the Freshwater Trust. That was with SweetSense. So IBM and SweetSense, they got in touch with Freshwater Trust, and then they're using this for groundwater usage. This has been going on since 2017, and it was a POC in 2017. 2019, it converted to a full-time project, and so they're looking at usage of freshwater, groundwater, right? Then there's this thing called Mobi, Mobile Open Blockchain Initiative. It was formed in 2018. This was between BMW, Ford, Mercedes, GM, and Chrysler, if I'm not mistaken, and and a bunch of other vendors like Allen Bradley, Bentley, and other vendors, right? The point was that anytime any industrial, firmware upgrades or anything used to happen, if the firmware was not coming from the right sources, it was doing a downtime, right? It was creating a downtime for these people. So these guys got together, and then they told their vendors to put the firmwares on blockchain, right? And even from their side, if there is a, you know, the list of machinery that they're using, the versions, PLC numbers, and all that, all goes on blockchain, right? And the vendors know which person needs what firmware, and then that firmware is provided, and then the hash of the firmware is on blockchain, and it's measured and then kept aside. Right? So it's been going on for almost 3 years now, and it's been a fantastic journey in terms of how blockchain is. Uh, the fourth one is remote access management. So Shell is using digital identities. It's giving its users digital identity, which is part YubiKey, part uh, blockchain, and anyone who wants to do remote access to the ICS in the fields, they're using that mechanism to get in touch with them, and then that's how they're providing access to it. Supply chain, right? So supply chain is mostly around traceability, right? And two of our own companies, right? Make in India, Cipher Code and Vibrathon, right? So they are into this transparency matrix. So Cipher Code, as we all know, they provide QR code for like Stanley's and a bunch of other companies. They partnered with CII for certification, and then they're providing a QR code over there, right? So anyone who can scan that QR code will get the transparency matrix, and then they can see where that originated from, who was the issuing authority and stuff like that, right? Something similar to what websites do with SSL, but imagine everyone can have that, right? So if you're buying like a coconut oil from the market, and then you scan the code, and then you get to know where the actual copra was produced from, right? So that's beautiful, right? And that's what that's what is happening in India right now. And these two companies have been very actively working on blockchain to provide that, right? So yeah, so these were the common use cases. I mean, I obviously went slightly 5 minutes ahead of my time, so I thought I'd just share what are the use cases, where we are with blockchain, and what I see in the future happening, right?
Superb, Ashutosh. That was a really comprehensive rundown of what.
Thank you.
I have really not much background. I don't spend too much time in blockchain,
Uh-huh.
but I got a high level understanding.
Mm-hmm.
The explanation with the databases, and it kind of puts the context together. Multiple databases, kind of in series, where it's sequentially getting better. the cryptographic.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think we have a lot of comments here. I think very nice to see the community. Blockchain seems to be a very very hot topic.
Yeah.
Let's we want to take some of these, Ashutosh. I think we should do that
Yeah.
first.
Yeah. Sure. 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 Yeah.
Hi Deepak, fantastic to see you join in. And Deepak's question, does that mean if there is a hack in one node, the legitimate user also loses that?
No. If there's a hack in one node, right? The first thing that will kick in is the rest of the nodes will get invalidated, right? So that would automatically trigger that the entire blockchain is getting invalidated. So then the consensus kicks in, and then the consensus will say, is that right? Right? And then everyone will agree that no, the rest of the blockchain is correct. This node is wrong, and then it's So the hack will happen at a particular point because it's distributed. So you and I have a copy. Let's say I get hacked, right? And then both of us, we say that no, this looks wrong, and then you will heal that system. You will say that this is the right copy, and my copy will get healed, right? So that's how it will work.
Wonderful. I think Vikram, if you're there, we would love to have you also. I will enable the raise hand feature, Vikram. I know you've been following this blockchain thread, and I'd love to have a bunch of blockchain guys, here and really go hardcore on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is your okay? Your video is not there.
That's cool. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hi,
Vikram.
Oh, okay. I can't figure out if I am. Am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible. Go on.
Oh, okay. No, I mean, I was just saying that very nice presentation. And recently, I was part in with the team where we actually helped the blockchain guys to basically fight with the 51% attack. It keeps on happening, and so overall, I mean, at very high level, what we figured out is that it is very easy to hack into any blockchain network. But the point is, you need to have a lot of money in order to keep that hack running. So there is no as he explained, it is not possible to hack. So how you do it is basically you try to run down the longest chain, like he was saying, 51% attack. So you try to become 51% bigger than the actual chain, and since it is all anonymous, automatically nodes would start shifting to the longest chain. So for example, let's say Bitcoin is $1 trillion, right? So 51% of that. So if I have that much amount of money and I can collect that much amount of hashing power, basically nodes, I mean servers, so I can essentially attack on Bitcoin. But then for how long? That depends on how much time I can run. So basically the network that we were helping in, it was not very big network. So it costed the attackers around $3.5 million to run the attack for 5 days. And the best part was that community actually helped that network get back. So everybody who was just holding the coins, they themselves went on and they started their own server and they literally kicked off. So I got to know that it actually works and it is secure. So all I'm saying is that, and there was no intervention there was no control from one party that, okay, this guy owns the network. I could see that it is actually owned by the whole community. So I just wanted to add on to exactly the points that Ashutosh actually added from the theoretically and also from the technical side. So this was my personal experience, and that's how I started believing more in this tech.
Yeah, and so just to expand on Vikram's point, right? They've been close to I think 11 or 12 attacks in the last 2 years on different kinds of cryptocurrencies, right? So, but the point is that let's say you are able to still hack, and then let's say you are able to capture the 51% of a smaller blockchain. Let's say a blockchain which has only like 10,000 nodes. You have enough money that you can get 51% of that 10,000 nodes, right?
Yeah.
But then that community part, which is the consensus, right, that kicks in, and then people will say, no, right, this doesn't look right. So you just don't have to do 51% on one place. So you have to do 51% on everyone who's holding that money, right?
Yeah.
And that is a very hard thing to say because you don't know who has that, right? and that's where the power of blockchain comes in.
Absolutely. And I think no one can now do any harm to Bitcoin. I mean, at this point, it is very difficult it is the most secure network so far because of the number of, people owning that. So it is already proven itself that that is why people are investing in that coin. Uh, because they know it is more secure than the banks. Any bank in the world, it cannot beat what Bitcoin hashing power has got at this point. So that's how it is overrunning, the institutional. I mean, I don't want to get into that discussion anyway. Sorry.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I
yeah,
mean, I think that's a different discussion. I mean, there are like plus and minus to the whole
yeah, absolutely.
cryptocurrency discussion, right? While I do agree, I mean, it's based on very simple philosophies, right? So
Yeah,
that's a totally different discussion. But in terms of like blockchain itself, right? So that's what blockchain provides, and it happened to us also. So when I talk about like putting the blockchain on gateways, right? Completely different aspect. You're not talking about cryptocurrency or anything. You're talking about like a physical device, right? And what we did was in that physical device, you have your trusted execution environment. That's where our hash was stored. So when somebody tried to tamper with it, right? They changed one file, and then it changed the entire hash, right? And that node itself was considered to be read,
yeah,
right? And then it was flagged immediately, right? So there's like beautiful use cases outside of it, right? Outside of the cryptocurrency, which are helping blockchain, right? Unfortunately, it's a lot of it is still behind closed doors, right? But Mobi and all are getting out. They're talking to more people, and then they're getting it out. So I'm going to see. I'm sure we're going to see like a lot of use cases, outside as well.
Like, many questions you have for Ashutosh, I mean, because both of you are into the blockchain technology. Anything you want to ask him? I mean, or up to you. Take this.
yeah. So just one thing is that so if somebody is building on a public network, so I mean, and with the controversy that government keeps creating on, so how do we keep building and then also not get distracted, because then we want to focus on the engineering side, but then it's connected with controversies. So it is not actually controversial, but people want to make it controversial. So I don't know. So that is, I just want to know your thought and how do you keep your mind at peace with.
So there are two aspects to it, right? One is, are you going to be only an Indian company or you're going to be a global company? The moment you talk about a global company, that regulation slightly takes a little bit of edge out, right? Uh, that's one aspect. The second aspect is, when you talk purely in terms of blockchain, right? The government has not put any regulations around it, right? In fact, government is a little more pro around blockchain. There is like 5 use cases I know in the government that are using blockchain, or the blockchain has been proposed, right? Most of the apprehension is around crypto currency, right? And there are certain reasons for it. I mean, if you go to dark web, most of the transactions are in cryptocurrencies, right?
Yeah,
Your Silk Road and Revenge Bond and whatever you want to talk about, all of them are on the crypto, right? So there is like a certain use cases where India is trying to get ahead. Like if you look at US and all, there is no like a regulation around it, and then it has grown out of proportion, right? So maybe that's what it is. But there are two things, right? One is, it's not like India will ban cryptocurrencies, right? So they will eventually come up with their own, and then they'll launch it for public only when they have the confidence that
right.
they can control 51% of it, right? So only then they will do that, because if they do it before that, everyone will try to hack it, right? Right. So they'll eventually launch that, right? So there is no apprehension in terms of like why cryptocurrency is there. I mean, it's more apprehension around how it's being used, right? And I think we will see it get around to that fact, right? But in general, if you're purely into blockchain, there is no problem. And if you are into crypto, I would say that as of now, focus on another market, or just see other markets. There are like plenty of other markets which are using Bitcoins or other cryptocurrencies very easily, right? So I would not get distracted. I mean, I don't think the whole of the world is right now looking to ban cryptocurrency, right? So
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Thank you. Thank you for getting me on stage.
sure.
Yeah.
I think Deepak is coming online. Deepak?
Hi, Deepak.
Hi, Ashutosh.
Hi.
I have probably two questions. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, if I understood it right or wrong.
Mhm.
You were saying that, I mean, giving the example of the ledgers that you were using between you and Jagat, both of you have copies of the same ledger, right? So, assuming you have, say, 100 land records, going back to your Australian example, it means all the 100 nodes will have a similar data. So does that mean that 100 records, if it was being stored in the traditional database and vis-a-vis blockchain, because so there is so much of duplication across all the nodes, and hence the amount of space that it requires to store 100 records is going to be so much more. That was my first question. And then the second question was, if I remember it correct, you said that it is always a one-time write, and that data stays forever. It is never overwritten. So if there is any change, for example, go back to a land record, if it is sold to from Ashutosh to Jagat, it is only in the subsequent nodes that the change in the record is going to be recorded. Is
Yes.
my understanding,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
So does that mean that accessing that information is because it will have to go back? This is like the the pointers, right? It goes here first, from there it gets redirected to one more place because there is a change in the record. So does that mean one more of storage as compared to a conventional database storage, and the time involved in terms of tracking the changes in the records?
Yes. So I'll answer your second question first, right? So
Yeah.
yes, you're absolutely right. So I mean, if there's an addendum to be done or there's a correction to be done, that will be another node, right? And if you
Right.
think from an audit perspective, right, the database should be doing the same thing, right? If you look at the financial
Right.
industry, right,
Right.
I worked in finance. So I'll just give you a very simple example, right? So market data used to come to us, and then based on market data, we do a calculation. But market data is market data. It would change over a period of the day, right? But that
Right.
doesn't mean that when we give the final report, it's based on the latest market data. We have to show all the data, right?
The
So
historical data.
yeah, so you have to keep an audit record, right? So a good database design will not overwrite anyways, right? So it'll create
Okay.
like like a audit record, right? So the blockchain does the same thing. It's just that it's more opinionated. That there is no other way. You have to do it that way.
Mm.
Right? In a
Right.
database, you will have to make it on your side. You'll have to make sure that you are putting the effort to do that, right? Now, to your first point, right? Yes, it's more storage required, right? So because Jagat and I, and let's say you are also in that, right? So all of us will store a copy of the like the transaction, right? So it will definitely require more storage, right? But that's why it's the transaction itself is very minimal in terms of like cryptocurrencies. It's like who sent the money, who received the money, and what was the amount, right? So the digital ID of the person who sent, digital ID of the person who received, and then that, right? So because that's easy to compress, right? So it doesn't have like a huge set of data. It has very minimal set of data, and then you're getting it, right? So even let's say if you take the supply chain example, right? So it has like where the data came from, what was the quantity, and that's it, right? You don't store more than that. So that's like a design decision, but yes, in terms of storage, it will require more storage because multiple people will get the same copy of the data.
Okay. But why did they not look at something similar to what we used to use in hard servers, the RAID implementation, where it's actually a distributed parity, right? Where it's not redundancy in data, but you use the other two hard disks to rebuild the third data using the parity bit. Couldn't
And
that have been used?
so that's a discussion which is in place, right? So I mean, if you think about it, the life of blockchain started from currencies, right? And in terms of currencies, you cannot have that parity information, right? So if like I have my, if you're maintaining a ledger, the ledger has to be the same everywhere, right? So that's why it was born from that. But there is an ICS blockchain which is in place, which is on the similar principles that there is one place, it's still a decentralized data server which is storing the main information, and then people just have like a link to it, and then they can link, and then they get the data, right? So there is like a proof of work that is happening.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Ashutosh.
No problem. Thank you.
Thanks, Deepak. We have Lakshmana on the line.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Hi, Lakshman.
Okay. So my question is very basic. As as a common person, if you don't have something like a latency, I mean, if you can't do it without a latency, how can you do some real time? How can you bring it to real time transactions? I mean, like payment transactions. Can we do it? Maybe this question is very silly. I don't know, but as a common man, I'm asking.
In terms of it's being used in digital wallets as well. There are a few digital wallets which are using blockchain. So the information goes to the central server. The server has to be very powerful, right? You can have a client which is simpler, right? But the server has to be very powerful, right? The client should at least be able to digitally sign that, right? So it cannot be a Raspberry Pi, but at least as long as it's a phone that you're using, you'd be able to digitally sign and then send the data to the server, and then you get the data, right? So in terms of mobile wallets, it's definitely possible without having a latency.
No, but a mom and pop store cannot have blockchain because they cannot have a server of that power to do it some quick transaction. Right?
Yes, a mom and pop store, first of all, they'll require a network. If they're requiring a network, then that network needs to have like a blockchain which is running at least on AWS or someplace, right? So Ethereum, as a use case can be run on AWS, right? And you can have your entire, blockchain running on AWS. So all they need to do is, let's say there are 10 mom and pop stores which are running their own private blockchain. So each of them has a computer, and then when they, do a POS, right, that information goes to the blockchain which is on AWS. So they'll have to invest somewhere, right, on the infrastructure.
Business model also, huh? Business opportunity.
Business opportunity.
Thank you.
Yes.
Blockchain for.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. Fantastic. Real business opportunity there. Huh?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking about it.
OYO for groceries in blockchain. Blockchain accepted, huh? I mean, no Paytm and stuff. We're like, this is the beauty of this show, right? People comes $1 billion idea there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think, these were the main questions from the audience. Sunil also has said it's a great session. Fantastic. I have maybe 2-3 simple questions again.
Sure.
As a normal, just as an entrepreneur and looking at the space. Let's look at the current trends, Ashutosh. You're obviously on top of things. Let's say Jodova aside, 3 big solutions that you see, like your own things that you admire, or something that's amazing. Globally, startup solutions, couple of them.
You're looking at like global solutions?
Global. I mean, what blows your mind in terms of the blockchain, industry? 2 or 3 solutions or companies.
I mean, I think the biggest one that blew my mind, and especially in terms of the acceptance, was Mobi, right? So the mobile blockchain initiative, right? So getting BMW and Mercedes and all these players to agree that let's get this together, and then not just from that part, right? Even from like Alan Bradley and then Bentley and all those guys to agree that they're going to ride. To me, that was like a very big success to it, right? And second, I'm biased towards it, but the JP Morgan is my second biggest one, because that kind of brought blockchain out, right? I mean, before that, blockchain was all about Bitcoin, and then everyone was talking about Bitcoin, and then suddenly there was this new thing called Hyperledger. And then Blythe, the way they worked on it, they made it open source, and then REST API enabled, so anyone can write it. So like literally, if you go to like hyperledger.com and then you look at APIs, and then you can write your own code, right? So that in terms of like blowing up blockchain, it was like a big deal, right? So these two for me are like the game changers, right? So because they got the industry to be
Go
involved.
to the mainstream.
Yeah, they brought it mainstream. Today, if any one of us are able to use blockchain is because of Fabric, which is from Hyperledger, right? So they made it very easy for that, right?
Supervised it.
Yes, yeah. So to me, these two are the biggest use cases of blockchain.
Now, I keep reading a lot about blockchain, obviously, and I was in touch with KPMG a couple of years ago. I was thinking about where is the telecom use case for blockchain, because obviously we're in the telecom space, video. And in your view, right, what is the kind of roadmap in terms of blockchain solutions with an India focus? Let's say India now, as you know, blockchain they've always been for.
Yeah.
Bitcoin, again, government has vested reason for doing what to do. Nothing wrong with that. Again, it's not standardized. It's still got a lot of fluctuation. Today, you cannot make that mainstream in India yet, right? I mean, it would be a little risky. It's not yet a mature kind of instrument yet, I would say. That's backed by so much logic. Like even the markets, there is an element of risk, but there is some logic underlying. But I think in blockchain, I think people are struggling to find that underlying logic at all. And I think that's the the problem there. But if you look at an India focus, Ashutosh, blockchain, where do you think two, three big areas where in India it can really impact?
I think one is the digitization, right? I mean, whether it's records, whether it's like mobile, electricity, all these areas. I feel that that's where the blockchain is headed, and that's where it will see its value, right? I mean, but this is one area where you need a lot of government intervention. We cannot obviously do it, right? So we cannot go and write the land records, but I mean, that to me is like the one big use case in India. From two perspectives, right? So one is, from a perspective of digitizing the information. The second is also when we talk about like mobile wallets, when we talk about all these things, right? Their penetration is, let's be honest, like the 10% of tier 1 cities, right? They're not in tier 2, they're not in tier 3, right? But the moment you start talking about like blockchain to create like digital identities, right? I'm not trying to say that rewrite Aadhaar, but try to do something over there. Then you have like this information of people, right? And then there's a lot of opportunities that can be explored, right? So that to me is like an opportunity waiting to happen, right? The second one is like you said, telecom. I'm going more towards electricity and power, right? Energy rather, right? So you take solar farms, for example, right? Or like hydroelectricity or all these use cases, right? So we are still a little more coal centric, right? So we are still generating our energy from all these sources, right? But no one knows how, no one knows how much, right? If we start digitizing that, and if we start putting blockchain over there, and then you start sharing it, right? Then there's an information flow that is happening. So to me, I think one of the things that, like, if you want to Google right now, right? I mean, how many banks NPAs are there? You're not going to get that information, right? Even though it's shared with RBI, it's shared here, right? It should be a public information, right? And it's buried somewhere in the their annual records, and then if you look at their
Right, an RTI.
yeah, not just an RTA. If you look at their like quarterly reports, annual reports, right? Somewhere in that there'll be like 3 lines mentioning that.
Who reads the annual report? I mean,
Yeah. Right, but the moment you start getting these things on blockchain, right? Simple records, and like HDFC Bank, this much profit, this much NPA, this, right? Then you start talking, right? Then you're talking about like information being publicly available. And if there's one thing that we have learned is that if you give public enough information, they'll build something great, right? I mean, and the best example of that I give to people is that if you look at
the Aadhaar stack as well, like India stack.
I mean, I'll give you a better example, right? So when iPhone was launched, when the first iPhone was launched, it did not have an app store, right? And Steve Jobs very famously said in 2007 that iPhone doesn't need an app store, right? And then it was like 2 guys, 17-year-old kids who hacked the iPhone and then created like Cydia system, which is the app store. And suddenly, Steve Jobs saw the opportunity, and then he had the app store. But the first app store had only 7 apps, right, from Apple. But then what Apple did was they opened that entire ecosystem for people to build something.
I mean,
Right?
the app is because of that.
Yes. So that's what I'm saying. Like, if you give people enough information, there is a potential to build a lot of things. Right. Right now, what is happening in India is that you have to hunt for that information.
There's no data. The real information is not there.
Yeah. So and that's what I would like to see, right? That's what I've been pushing the government, to get that, and then get all your old records onto blockchain. Get census data on blockchain. Let us know, like when we talk about marketing, right? A very simple example. When we talk about marketing, right? If you want to, let's say Vidphone, right? You want to push Vidphone in tier 3 cities, and then you want to Google, how many colleges in tier 3 cities, you will have no answer. Right. But if that information starts to trickle down, right, because the government has all this information, it starts to trickle down, it starts to come back in, right, then all you have to do is, you get on that blockchain, you have your own digital identity, which is secure, right? So you get onto that, you get that public information, and then you have like that record, right? So that thing is where India has an opportunity that no other country has, right? A lot of people have tried, Estonia has tried, Middle East has tried, but all of them are seeing a very small picture, right? The one that we are pushing for is like one digital India stack where, you get all this information in one place.
Absolutely. It's very important. I think, as again, I don't want to talk too much on the technology because I'm not an expert on blockchain, but the challenge for blockchain that I see really that's there is the market issue. Is that a lot of this data we're talking about, whole industries or, let's say the, net NPAs of banks, the thing is that people don't want these out.
Yeah, but the thing is that these are already out, right?
But again, you got to go search in the annual report. So you go do searching. So out of 10 people, maybe 2 guys will go. So that's good for them. So I think the reality, the market side, like, even for example, land contracts, right? The smart contracts for land. The land business. I was in, real estate 10 years back, and lesser said the better. I think that's something that needs to be worked out. They have to be like the drivers of Oyo or Ola or Oyo, like how the hotel guys are incentivized.
Yeah.
There should be an incentive somehow for these people to go digital. Monetarily.
Yeah, which is why I'd like the government intervention here. I mean, I'm usually against government intervention, right? When people talk about like budgets and this and that, they talk about government is not doing anything or they're doing anything, right? No other country talks about that, right? So those things don't bother me. But when it comes to this part, I think that government intervention is required because RBI has all that information, right? The human development, like the what you call it, land development authority has all this information, right? That we're talking about, right? And unless that digitization happens, right, it would not matter, whether the other players don't want to give that information. You have to share the information with the government, and if the government is providing that, then you're good, right? And it's not something which is difficult, right? If you go to like some states in US and you look for like criminal records or land records, states like Colorado and all that will give you that information, right? So there is like the state website for every state, and then you can get that information. So it's not hard, right? It's just that the effort does not have to be from state governments because every state government is reporting that data to the central, right? So that push has to be from the central government.
Yes. And land is a state subject. So for example, Bangalore. Let's look at the land in Bangalore. BDA, and then you have BBMP sites, A and Tata B. So the actual data is with these guys.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I'm not going to get into land, like you said, right? And the lesser it has to decide.
That's a great idea, like making land transparent. Because when you look at the real estate business, it changes the whole game. Today, I know available one click what's available, right? That's not. But they don't want it to be available.
Yeah, absolutely.
There, it's the point. I think. Yeah. In fact, I look at Bitcoin again. Bitcoin's taken the kind of it's the what do you say, like the flag bearer of blockchain blockchain itself. I would say today. It made all the noise. It's validated the use case fairly well. It succeeded. I think that's the greatest thing. Right? Any new technology like this, I would say blockchain reasonably new. In terms of public usage,
relatively, yeah.
Right? Video conferencing, it's been there forever.
Yes.
The concept's been there, but as a consumer technology, as a utility, it's not yet there. Right. And similar to video, right now, it's really becoming mainstream. What I'm looking at is who are the celebrities, right? Today, when you look at let's say Elon Musk suddenly talks about this, creates more and more of this, what do you call, volatility, which is the first fear of Bitcoin itself.
Yeah.
So Bitcoin, I say, is like email. Like email was the first proof of internet, or the application of internet. Otherwise, there's no internet. There was no concept. Email came, and email was the first real example how World Wide Web worked. And similarly here, I think Bitcoin has validated how blockchain works, the technology. So one thing is, again, these celebrities who, for example, Bitcoin now people in India don't want, but we're okay with blockchain. It's like saying, I don't know, I mean, what's the comparison there, right? It's like a subset of something is not accepted, but the superset is accepted, right? And this is again because of the money aspect of it. The blockchain is not dealing with the money; it's getting the security data. That's fine. But here in Bitcoin, there is this. It's like a stock market. I know, like a lot of guys are buying it. It's not treated purely. You don't invest in rupees like that.
Yeah.
You don't hoard rupees. But here in Bitcoin, you're saying it's a currency, but everyone's trying to hoard it. So there is something that I find like there is a disconnect in the understanding fundamentally, and that's why this apprehension is happening. Like Vikram was saying, what if government bans Bitcoin tomorrow? Now, Bitcoin by design is a global currency. Now, no country would ever want a global currency. It depends on who you are, because that leveling out, I think, it depends on, like, a Bangladesh may want it. They may want to be equal, like move forward. US would not want to lose their dollar. So this is like a big, I think that's the, clarity is not there on how that's going to happen, right? Because when you see currencies, again, current, right? Currencies come from the word current.
Yeah.
Like flow. Before it was cattle, right? And before that was barter. So it's all about the exchange. Now, when there is no fundamental, and actually, if you see even the actually gold, there is no like fundamental value. It's really what the market's paying for it, right? So
Yes.
Bitcoin on similar lines. In fact, Jack Dorsey, I think sometime back, he was the guy who I first with. The whole world's going to run on Bitcoin in 10 years.
Yeah.
That's a crazy statement to make.
Yeah.
10 years, it's in the whole world. So these celebrities, I feel like kind of make, and even the traders in India. The moment you start scamming people, or some kind of, unlike a Bitcoin, you have some other things that come. There was this exchange, I believe, where he bought some, not Bitcoin, some other, cryptocurrency. And now the site just doesn't open. It says like we are shut. Right. So these things, I think it becomes a fraud. And then that's why the government again starts being careful. Because let's say normal people invest in Bitcoin, a farmer, and, let's say 1 million farmers put money for some reason. It's how, a company comes and says like mutual fund, you can now buy Bitcoin. That's the catastrophic. Like tomorrow something happens, boom, the country is gone.
Which is why, India has still its apprehensions around Bitcoin, right? I mean, cryptocurrency in general, right? But the future that I see is going to be that India will have, and it's not just India, like every country will eventually have its own like a physical currency and a digital currency. Right? So, so what will eventually happen is that US either will adopt or have Bitcoin as its main thing, or it's have its own currency. India is definitely starting that, right? So they're looking at their own state-owned cryptocurrency, as what they're saying.
Is it Lakshmi coin?
Yeah,
Lakshmi coin?
Something like that. I don't follow crypto that much.
I'm not going to trade it.
Right. So eventually what will happen is that every country worth its money will start to have its own
so it again becomes like just a currency, right? I mean, it's not democratic and global anymore. Again, they're the bottom.
That's how money works. I mean, money is always going to be controlled by banks, right?
So I think we're coming to the state where it's not going to be a public blockchain that Bitcoin is on. I mean, if I can get that framing right, it will all be private blockchains, which are the country is the private blockchain.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, that's the power of money, right? So I mean, I'm not going to get very philosophical on it, but right? But eventually, that's what is controlled. See, if you look at Bitcoin right now, I have some Bitcoins, right? So in Bitcoin terms, great, right? What can I do with that, right? I can't do anything with it, right? I can't. I mean, I can trade it, right? But eventually, there was some Walmart where you could use Bitcoin. There were some places where you could use Bitcoin, but now it's only between people. Let's say I get work done from somebody, so then I'm paying them in Bitcoin. But that it pretty much is like a physical proof of work, right? So it's no different from the proof of work that was happening digitally, right? So if you look at Bitcoin right now, it's staying in the state of flux. Of course, there's way, you can redeem it from like dollars and then get that, right? So, but
Tesla, you can buy, I believe, on Bitcoin.
yeah, we'll see about that. It's nice to say, but it's when instead of paying $35,000, you're paying like 10 bitcoins or 20 bitcoins, then Elon will also think about
And
it.
let's say what he says when the price crashes tomorrow. Let's see if he accepts it. I mean,
Exactly, right? So that's the thing, right? So it's great to have this discussion that Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency. It has brought a lot of things, right? So has Ethereum, so has other things, right? But what is the value that it's bringing right now, right? And when you think about it, it's all in the air, right? It's all in the digital form, right? So you and I can trade it. You and I can talk about it, right? So we can share like a work, right? But that we can do on any understanding. Right? It doesn't have to be just Bitcoin or rupees or dollars or any other way, right? So and that's where the challenge is. And that's why I think eventually what will happen is that the financial industry will get together and say that, boss, we all need our own Bitcoins, right? And then
and let's start, finding a new vehicle to start selling to these guys, right? Let's sell the crap out of it.
yes.
ETFs and everything around Bitcoin, and God knows what's going to happen.
I mean,
Crazy.
I'm just guessing, right? But I mean, this is just a trend of the market.
I think,
Because
yeah, when you see it go out, they cannot be like a global currency. I think in our lifetime or next 10 years, it's really tough to actually see that materialize like a global currency.
it might happen, but it will be a catastrophe. And I can tell you how, right? So I mean, it's a very simple case, and it has happened before, right? So let's say I'm sitting over here, and then I request $10,000 from you, right? And then you are in India, I'm in US, and then you transfer the money. So it's night time for me, right? So you transfer the money, and then morning I say I go bankrupt, right? So by the time your morning comes, you have transferred $10,000 and have gone bankrupt. So you've lost money, right?
Einstein, relativity and stuff.
Yeah. So and this is a real use case, right? In 1988, this happened between US and Czechoslovakia, if I'm not mistaken, and that's why the Basel rules came into play, and then the regulations for Basel for international currencies, international trades happened, right? So it's very nice to say that you can transfer the money, but you're still sitting in India, right? So your digital time zone has become the same because you're all on the same distributed ledger, but you wake up tomorrow morning and then you find out that I've gone bankrupt and you lost the money. What are you going to do?
Bitcoin.
Right. So there are like practical aspects where Bitcoin will see its challenges. I'm not saying that we'll not see it in our lifetime, but we'll if we do, we'll go through one catastrophe at least once.
I think multiple also. I mean, iteration is the name of the game, and
Yeah.
that's when it gets stronger. Great. I think that's going to be interesting. But do you think it's going to be Bitcoin?
I am not sure. I'm not a big person on predicting market. I don't think
It's not like the first mover advantage or something.
it's gone too big, right? And what I think it's what $8,000 or something. So it's too big.
Really good. I think Vikram. I think quickly you can just pop in. Happy to have you again, and some interesting.
I mean, no. It was about the I mean, you can just stop my video, man. I don't know. I'm in a dark area. So I was saying that
it's shady. It's all on blockchain. So
about that. You guys were talking about like why somebody should believe on cryptocurrency, and is it almost similar to our fiat, right? Only difference that I personally feel is that you can mathematically prove how many numbers of coin are available and how many number of coin would be available in whatever time period, and then all the economic mathematics that you are putting in is based on that. It's not based on something like, I don't know how much reserve is actually there in the central bank, and then maybe they print like 3 times of that, and then all the economics mathematics which have been done to control or balance the market will fail, and that is why fiat keeps on failing. And right now crypto is fluctuating because hype and all, but if you see there is already a concept of Bitcoin halving, and every 4 years it is very definite, like only this many numbers of coins are available. So if the number of people are wanting to have it more, so that is why the price is fluctuating. But I'm saying, let's not look at it from the angle of hype, how it has got to 50,000. But I am more, at least if Indian government comes in on a ledger and it says that, look, we are we are having actual record of, let's say, $50 million of gold, which is third party verified, and then we are printing this much of money. Now each of us can cryptographically prove that the 1 rupee that I have is actually part from that. It is not just printed out of thin air. So that's all. From that angle, I feel that it is better to have a network-based token than right now what we have.
So I'm going to play a devil's advocate here. That's purely because um, when you talk about a digital currency, right? As far with respect to a physical currency, right? The physical currency belongs to a country, right? So then it gets tied to the GDP, gets tied to the inflation, gets tied to a lot of things, right? So if tomorrow we decide that we want to print more money, that will end up in inflation, right? And if
Absolutely.
and if at some point we decide to not print money and then we want to hold, so that will cause like other issues, right? So your GDP will fall and then other things will happen, right? So the point is that at the moment every country has a physical currency which is tied to the economy of the country.
Entire system, global system,
and there's a system, right? So, but the moment you talk about something which is digital, which doesn't have a physical presence and it belongs to every country, right? It's very easy to say that because the number of people who are still on it are very less, right? I mean, there's hardly probably like 5% of the people who are on it, right? The moment you talk about like everyone getting on board, like 7 billion people getting on board, the amount of transactions that are going to happen on a day-to-day basis, you would eventually find that problem of like, how are you going to digitally verify that, right? So one currency, I mean, it's nice to say. I would personally like to see one currency, ruling the whole world, but it's a food for thought, right? I mean, if you just look at HDFC per day, they do 20 million transactions, right? I'm talking about just HDFC. I mean, you multiply it by every bank in India multiplied by every bank in the world, and then you're talking about that much transactions per day, right? Is Bitcoin ready to handle that? Bitcoin halving happens every 4 years because the chain becomes so long that they have to think of how are they going to process it, right? So that halving, instead of having every 4 years, will have it happen every 4 minutes, right?
Once you figure out the
there is not just like one problem when it comes to Bitcoin. It's very nice to see. I'm a cryptography expert. I'm a math guy. For me, it's a wonderful thing. I can talk about blockchain all day long. But then when you tie it to a currency, tying it to a global economy, you're talking about a lot of aspects which are very hard to understand.
I think that's great point. In fact, just having this quick thought, and I've come to this, my own conclusion here, Ashutosh.
Mm-hmm.
And Vikram, anything else there? Any other points? Are you good?
No, I'm fine.
All right, great to have you join us. A lot of learning and sharing, right? We're going to prepare something later, and we're going to have you also.
Yes,
that's all.
Absolutely.
Thanks. In fact, I came to this. I just thought of this, Ashutosh. I mean, so now we can start predicting that every 4 years it's halving, and tomorrow it's going to go up, and day after it's going to go. I mean, there's no life. It can't work that way.
Yeah, exactly.
Default has to be random.
That's exactly why, when you talked about like whether it will happen in our lifetime, it may, but it will eventually end up in a lot of catastrophes.
True. And I think it can also be like, it's not a one or zero thing, right? I mean, you can have rupees also. It's like how you stayed in stocks, or you may also have land. It's an asset class. It's just like an asset class, right? I think it's just a vehicle or an instrument, just like your stocks and stuff. Fantastic. All right. I think we have gone to 20 minutes.
We have gone 30 minutes.
So much of interaction from the audience. I want to thank everyone, guys. Like, you really make it awesome for us to do these things. Thanks again, Ashutosh. Like, extremely insightful.
Thank you for
I'm ready.
Yeah. No, I mean this was a great talk, and I'm really happy that everyone joined in. It was fantastic. I mean, I was a little apprehensive. We're going to talk about something which is very technical. Usually we don't do that, but thank you all for joining.
It's like what we always want. Like I say, even when I was playing I was in UP. I did my engineering at Allahabad.
Mm-hmm.
I was in a rock band, right, in my first second year.
Okay.
Now UP is in rock music.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this was in like 2006, 7.
Oh, good Lord.
When you're playing at 11 o'clock, you're the last act, and obviously some beers and all that, and you got your own guitars, and I'm playing heavy metal, and I got like 10 people with me or 5 people with me. The whole college is left, but they are your crowd.
Yeah.
So this is like that niche blockchain crowd that's there.
Yeah.
That's more important than having the 100 guys doing Bhangra when we're singing heavy metal.
Yeah.
So hats off, guys. Thanks again, Ashutosh. We'll discuss about the next one. I think this has given us a lot of idea how we can add more value in the 1 hour.
Yes.
We've also learned something, and awesome. I learned a lot. That's what I got.
Same here.
Thanks a lot, everybody, and thanks, Ashutosh.
Thank you. Yeah. Have a good day, everyone. Have a good weekend. Thank you for joining.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Take care. Bye.